Hi, I'm Damien, and I'm a student of salsa and bachata dancing. I've been learning over the last year, and I noticed one of the most frustrating parts is learning to count. If you go to class, you're very likely to get little out of it as a beginner if you can't already count music. And I did learn to count, and that's what I want to share with you. But there are a lot of, I would say, mistakes that people make when they're trying to learn to count. And so we're going to avoid those mistakes. But I've done all of these, so let me just go through them real quickly. And in the next video, we'll start actually counting. So the first mistake people make is they start with salsa. Now, if you don't already know salsa music, it's kind of complex and it's also kind of fast. So I'd recommend that you learn to count on slower music, and that's what we'll do. They count to 8. Music is on an 8 count, but it's just as easy to count to 4 twice. 8 is more than twice as high as 4, I think. So I'd recommend stay away from 8. Also, when you're using your fingers, it's so much easier to go to 4 than to go to 8, which is really, really difficult. So another mistake I made is not counting every beat. Try to just pick out the 1 because in class you take your first step on 1 and you just sit there and try to listen and go 1, listen, 1, and that's really difficult. If you just count every beat, it's much easier. So we'll do that. A lot of times people don't use real music. So I love the Salsa Rhythm app, but it's not great for counting. It's great for learning about salsa, exploring all the different instruments that are used to create the music. But if you're trying to learn to count, it's not a very good tool because it's not real music. It doesn't include breaks, doesn't include accents, things like that. So, um, also, people tend to skip elements of the music that make it easier to count. So if you're just listening to something like salsa rhythm or an instructor with a kind of random song, maybe it won't have what I call a cowbell. It's not actually a cowbell, but you'll hear it later. It plays always on the 1 and the 3, the 1 and the 3, and it makes it so much easier to learn to count. So we'll start out with salsa songs that include plenty of cowbell to kind of keep us on track. Um, Another thing not to do is I wouldn't count out loud. When you're dancing, it's going to use a lot of energy and you're going to need to breathe. So I would not count out loud. You will definitely lose your breath. And also, if you're counting to 8, it's kind of a mouthful. So salsa music is fast, and if you try to count every number with your mouth, at least for me, it's really difficult. So I'll tend to count with my fingers, just like tapping like this, even maybe shoulders. So, and then don't try to dance when you're learning to count. Um, Counting with your feet is way more difficult than counting with your fingers or even better, your brain. And learning to dance is already learning something, and learning to count is learning something. So try to just focus on one thing at a time, and it'll be way easier to learn. So here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to learn to count. We're going to use snaps, fingers, maybe our head, like our shoulders. There's a whole series of videos that you can use to quiz yourself. So I'll count along with the music, then I'll stop, and you need to keep counting, and then I'll come back in and you can see if you were on or not. And once you are always on, then you can count. Um, all of the songs that we're counting are on a Spotify playlist. That list is called Learn to Count Salsa. It's public, it's free. You can use it when you're driving, you can use it when you're working out, and it just will help you get familiar with the songs. They're the same songs that we'll use later when we actually dance. Okay, so it's really good to get to know them. And again, don't dance when you're learning to count. It's only going to be confusing. So that's sort of my list of complaints, my list of mistakes. Again, I made all those mistakes and it made it take much longer to learn to count. My goal is for you to learn to count much faster, maybe just a day or two, maybe even just a few hours if you go through the numbers or go through the songs and don't encounter any issues. So good luck, and I hope to see you on future videos. Thanks.